The smell of lilies clung to the air, a sickening perfume for the grief that choked me as I stood by Noah's casket. My son, gone. As I stumbled down the hall seeking a moment's respite, I overheard my daughter-in-law, Elizabeth, her voice chillingly clear. Now I finally get to get rid of that old shrew. The nursing home is where she belongs anyway. My heart shattered, but a quiet resolve began to knit it back together, fueled by a secret Noah had whispered in his final days. Elizabeth thought she had won, but she had no idea what awaited her when his will was read. You here follow my story until the end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has. The scent of lilies hung heavy in the air, mingling with the raw ache of grief that clung to the walls of the funeral home. I stood there frozen by Noah's casket, my trembling hand brushing the cold, lifeless skin of his cheek. My beautiful boy, my only child, gone. How was this real? How was I, at 68 years old, standing here, burying my son? No parent should ever live to see this day. 3 months, that's all it had taken. Just 3 cruel, ruthless months from diagnosis to death. Cancer showed no mercy. It robbed us of time. Time to say the things that still needed to be said. To prepare for a world that no longer had Noah in it. Mrs. Harrison, would you like to sit down? A gentle voice interrupted my spiral of thoughts. The funeral director, soft-spoken and well-practiced in grief, offered me a seat. I nodded silently, moving like a ghost toward the front row, letting him guide me. The room spun with whispers and muted footsteps. People kept approaching, their mouths forming condolences I couldn't hear over the roar in my ears. I nodded, hugged, shook hands, automatic responses from a body disconnected from its soul. Beside me, Elizabeth sat perfectly composed. 15 years my daughter-in-law, Noah's college sweetheart, the woman I had welcomed into our family like the daughter I'd never had. Her black dress was flawless, every pleat pressed, her makeup immaculate even as she dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. A picture of dignity and sorrow. I need some air, she murmured, squeezing my hand briefly before rising and walking gracefully toward the back of the room. I watched her go, wondering how the two of us would manage this loss. Noah had always been the glue, the bridge between us. What were we now without him? A few minutes passed before I realized I needed my medication. My arthritis had flared up from the standing and the cold. I steadied myself with my cane and slowly made my way down the hallway, wincing at each step. As I neared the alcove near the restrooms where a few people gathered to smoke, I heard her voice, Elizabeth's, bright and unnatural, a jarring contrast to the solemn atmosphere inside. "Oh God, I thought this day would never end," she said, exasperation dripping from every word. So many people coming up to me, telling me how sorry they are, asking if there's anything they can do. She sighed dramatically, as if I need their casseroles and their pity. A soft chuckle came from one of the women standing with her. "Well, at least it's almost over. What happens next?" Elizabeth's tone shifted, her voice firm and full of purpose. "Next, I finally get my life back," she said sharply, "and I finally get rid of that old shrew." My breath caught. My body froze mid-step, my fingers tightening around the handle of my cane until my knuckles turned white. No, she couldn't mean me. "Olga?" one of the women asked, hesitant. "Of course, Olga." Elizabeth's voice curled around my name like a venomous snake. "Noah insisted she move in with us after Harold died. She has nowhere else to go, Liz. She's all alone, Liz. Well, Noah's gone now. I don't have to play nice anymore." "And what will you do with her?" the woman asked again, her voice lower this time. "There's a perfectly adequate nursing home just outside town," Elizabeth said with a laugh, a sound that once had a musical ring to it, but now sounded twisted, mean. "She's nearly 70. That's where she belongs anyway." "Won't she resist?" came the hesitant question. "With what?" Elizabeth snapped. "She has no money. The house is in my name. Noah and I made sure of that when his father passed. She signed everything over to remember? We told her it was to avoid probate." Then her voice dropped into a mock whisper. "The old bat doesn't even know Noah left everything to me. In a week she'll be packing her bags." I stood rooted in place, every muscle in my body trembling. The restroom was forgotten. All I could do was turn and quietly retrace my steps, desperate not to be seen. How had I been so blind? How had I missed the signs? I thought she loved me. I truly believed she saw me as family. Back in the viewing room, I looked at Noah's face, so peaceful, so still, and wondered, had he known? Had he realized how his wife truly felt about me? Would he have done anything differently if he had? I wiped my eyes and forced myself to sit up straighter. I wouldn't let her see me broken. Not today. Not at my son's funeral. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I shook more hands, gave a short speech I could barely remember delivering, and watched as they lowered my son's casket into the ground. Through it all, Elizabeth never left my side, her arm linked with mine, playing the role of the grieving widow supporting her devastated mother-in-law. But I heard it now, the hollowness in her voice when she said, "We'll get through this together, Olga." I felt the false warmth in her hand as she helped me to the car. As we drove home in silence, I stared out the window at the quiet streets passing by, my thoughts spinning. Where would I go? What could I possibly do now? I had no savings, no property, no income. I had handed everything over to Noah and Elizabeth years ago, trusting them completely. The only home I had was the one Elizabeth clearly no longer wanted me in. But there was one thing she didn't know. One thing Noah had shared with me in those last quiet moments, just the two of us alone, while Elizabeth was out finalizing hospice arrangements. "Mom," he'd whispered, his voice frail but steady, his eyes locking onto mine with a clarity that startled me. "There's something important you need to know about my will." Now, as I watched Elizabeth's carefully composed face while she drove, I let her think she'd won. Let her imagine she had all the power. Tomorrow was the reading of the will, and everything would change. That night, I couldn't sleep. Her words from the alcove kept replaying in my mind like a cruel lullaby. That old shrew. Finally get rid of her. She belongs in a nursing home. I lay in the guest room, the one I'd slept in for 5 years, yet never truly felt was mine, and stared at the ceiling as the memories came flooding in, each more painful now that I understood how deeply I'd been betrayed. I remembered the day Harold died, just 8 years ago, my husband of 4 decades, taken from me by a heart attack. Noah and Elizabeth had rushed over immediately. They'd helped with the funeral, comforted me during those dark nights. It was Elizabeth who had gently suggested I sell our home. "Mom, it doesn't make sense for you to rattle around that big house all by yourself," Noah had said, his arm around her shoulders. "We have plenty of room," Elizabeth had added with a smile, "and we could invest the money from the sale for your future. That way, you'll never need to worry about finances again." It had seemed so loving, so sensible. I sold the home Harold and I had built together, the home where Noah had taken his first steps, scraped his knees, grown into a man. I handed over the $287,000 from the sale without hesitation. I never asked for bank statements, never questioned where the money went. I trusted them. How foolish I had been. She stood by the window, gazing out at the meticulously maintained backyard where the swimming pool shimmered in the early morning light, surrounded by carefully trimmed hedges and flower beds arranged with the precision of a professional landscaper. Everything looked perfect on the surface. The pool, the stone-paved patio, the gleaming outdoor kitchen with its top-of-the-line appliances, it all looked like a dream. But I knew the truth behind the polished facade. That backyard, like the house itself, had been built on my sacrifices. The down payment for this place had come straight from my account. The renovations, the pool, the luxury amenities, those had been funded by me as well. Yet, the deed listed their names, not mine. It was the same story with the vacation cabin up in the mountains. We'd purchased it using the last of Harold's life insurance, supposedly for tax purposes. Elizabeth had explained that it made things simpler, more straightforward. And I'd agreed, why wouldn't I? I trusted them. They were my family. I walked slowly to the dresser, the familiar creak of the floorboards beneath me oddly comforting. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out an old, worn photo album, its corners frayed, the cover soft from years of being held and flipped through. I sat down and opened it carefully, the plastic sheets crackling faintly. The first photos were of Noah as a baby, bundled in blue blankets, his tiny fingers curled around mine. Then a toddler with bright eyes and a mop of dark curls, later a tall, gangly teenager with braces and a shy smile. There was a picture of him on his college graduation day, beaming with pride in his cap and gown. My fingers lingered on a photo of Noah and Elizabeth on their wedding day, his eyes filled with love as he looked at her. And then, a more recent photo, one taken at their 10th anniversary celebration. We were all smiling for the camera, but something struck me now that I hadn't noticed before. Elizabeth stood slightly apart from the rest of us, her smile tight, not quite touching her eyes. Was the truth already beginning to show, even then? Other memories, ones I'd brushed aside at the time, began to resurface. Moments I had dismissed as harmless. The impatience in Elizabeth's voice when I struggled to get in and out of the car due to my arthritis. Her exasperated sighs whenever I asked her for help with my phone or computer. The way she would plan family events to coincide with my weekly bridge club, only to act hurt when I stuck to my original plans. "You know how important family is to Noah," she'd say, her words laced with quiet judgment, leaving me guilty for having any semblance of a life outside of them. Then there were the grandchildren, Ethan, now 13, and Lily, 10. I loved them more than anything. But even with them, Elizabeth always maintained control. She limited my visits, closely supervised our time together, as if she didn't fully trust me to be alone with them. "The kids have their routines," she'd explain. "Too much stimulation isn't good for them." And I had accepted it, grateful for any opportunity to be part of their lives at all. But this morning, as the first rays of dawn crept over the horizon, a deeper, more disturbing realization settled over me. In the past few months, as Noah's illness worsened, Elizabeth had seemed unusually busy. She was always dashing off to meetings, leaving Noah in my care for hours, sometimes whole days on end. At first, I told myself she was simply doing what she had to in order to keep things afloat. But there were other signs I couldn't ignore anymore. She'd changed. She started dressing differently, more stylish, more put together, even for mundane errands. A new haircut, subtle makeup, not the appearance of a woman burdened by a husband slowly dying of cancer, but someone who wanted to be noticed. And then there was the message. Just 2 weeks ago, she had asked me to find her charger. While I was searching through her bag, her phone lit up. A text, just one line. "Can't wait to see you again. Last time was amazing. Ryan." I'd stared at the name, telling myself it had to be business-related. Elizabeth was in real estate. Networking was a part of the job. But the voice in my head wouldn't be silenced. It all made sense now. The extended business trips, the late-night phone calls taken behind closed doors, the sleek wardrobe. She'd been having an affair. While my son was dying, she had been planning a new life. The fury that rose in me was unlike anything I had ever known. How could she? How could she betray him like this? How could she betray me? Take what we'd built, what we'd sacrificed for, and throw it all away? I sat there, the album pressed tightly to my chest, when I heard a quiet knock at my door. "Grandma?" Ethan's voice was soft, unsure. "Are you awake? Mom said to tell you we're leaving for the lawyer's office in an hour." I took a long, steadying breath, then opened the door. He stood there in the hallway, so much like Noah had looked at that age. Same serious eyes, same stubborn cowlick, right at the crown of his head. "Thank you, sweetheart. I'll be ready soon." He hesitated for a moment, then stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me tightly. "I miss Dad," he whispered into my shoulder. "I know, honey," I murmured, holding him close. "I miss him too." Over Ethan's shoulder, I spotted Elizabeth in the hallway. Her expression was carefully composed, but her smile was too sweet, too perfect. "Don't bother Grandma too long, Ethan," she said in that saccharine tone. "She needs to get ready." Her eyes locked onto mine, flat and cold. "Today's an important day." I nodded slowly, the storm of emotion churning quietly beneath my skin. Yes, I thought as I closed the door behind me, today is an important day. The day Elizabeth finds out her plans might not unfold quite the way she expects. Because in one of those last private moments with Noah, when the illness had not yet stolen his clarity, when Elizabeth had gone out and we were alone, he had grabbed my hand with surprising strength and looked at me with eyes that had seen more than he'd ever let on. "Mom," he said quietly but firmly, "I've been watching." I've seen what's been going on, and I've made arrangements. I need you to know that. At the time, I hadn't fully understood what he meant. But now, piece by piece, it was all becoming clearer. The law office of Bradley and Associates occupied the top floor of a modest downtown building, nothing flashy or extravagant. We stepped out of the elevator and made our way down the hall to a large conference room. I leaned heavily on my cane, each step burdened not only by grief, but also by anticipation, a gnawing anxiety that settled deep in my bones. Elizabeth walked ahead of me with practiced poise, her back straight, her heels striking the hardwood floor in sharp, confident clicks. She was dressed not in morning attire, but in a sleek black pantsuit that screamed professionalism, more appropriate for closing a deal than attending the reading of a will. Ethan and Lily trailed behind us, unnaturally quiet, their usual spark dulled. I reached out and gently touched Lily's shoulder. She leaned into me, and for a moment I felt grounded again. Whatever Elizabeth had tried to instill in them, at least my grandchildren still sought my comfort. Mr. Bradley greeted us with respectful solemnity. He was a small man, older, with wisps of thinning gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses. His handshake was firm, his demeanor calm, as he gestured for us to take our seats. "Thank you all for coming," he began as he organized the stack of papers before him. "I know this is a difficult time, but Noah was very specific in his final wishes, and it's my responsibility to see they are carried out precisely as he intended." Elizabeth gave a slight nod, her expression carefully composed, her posture impeccable. But beneath the table, I noticed her fingers tapping rapidly against her thigh. Mr. Bradley looked down at his papers. "Before we begin the formal reading, I should mention that Noah made changes to his will approximately 6 weeks ago." The rhythmic tapping of Elizabeth's fingers stopped abruptly. "Changes?" she repeated, her voice a touch too high. "What kind of changes? He didn't say anything to me about that." Mr. Bradley looked at her calmly over the top of his glasses. "Yes, he came to see me privately. He was very clear about what he wanted." A flicker of something, uncertainty, maybe even fear, passed over her face. It was fleeting, but I caught it. She forced a polite smile and said, "I see. Well, let's proceed then." Mr. Bradley cleared his throat and began. "First, with regard to the family residence at 1742 Maple Avenue and the vacation property at Lake Tahoe." I held my breath. These were the homes my money had paid for, homes I had no legal tie to. "Both properties are to be placed into a family trust," he continued, "with Olga Harrison named as—" The room felt like it had dropped 10 degrees when Mr. Bradley announced, "Olga is named as the trustee. The trust grants her the right to live in either of the 2 properties for the remainder of her life. After her passing, both properties will go to Ethan and Lily Harrison, to be divided equally between them." Elizabeth's face turned pale, the blood draining so fast it looked like she'd been slapped. "That's not possible," she said, her voice tight with disbelief and growing panic. "The houses are in my name. Noah can't just—" "Actually," Mr. Bradley gently interjected, his voice steady but firm, "while the family home was originally purchased under both your names, Noah transferred his share of ownership in both properties to a trust 3 years ago. The paperwork was signed by you at the time." Elizabeth blinked, stunned. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. "As for the Tahoe property," he went on, "it was never in your name at all, despite what you may have thought. That home was purchased directly into the trust." The memory hit Elizabeth like a sudden gust of wind. She had signed something 3 years ago. Noah had told her it was just routine estate planning. She hadn't thought much of it back then, only rolled her eyes and called it unnecessary. But now she couldn't help but wonder, had he suspected even then what might happen? Mr. Bradley didn't pause. "As for Noah's financial assets, his retirement accounts total approximately $875,000. That amount will be divided as follows. 60% will go into a trust for Ethan and Lily's education and general needs. Olga will serve as trustee. 20% will go directly to Olga for her care and maintenance. The remaining 20% is allocated to you, Elizabeth." That was the moment Elizabeth's composure finally cracked. Her voice rose, sharp and outraged. 20%? That's it? That has to be a mistake." I'm afraid there's no mistake, Mrs. Harrison, Mr. Bradley said calmly. I personally drafted the documents based on Noah's explicit instructions during his final weeks. Elizabeth stood abruptly, her chair screeching across the floor. He wasn't in his right mind. He was drugged up on heavy medication. This will, it can be challenged. Mr. Bradley's expression didn't shift. He remained calm, composed. Noah was fully lucid when he made these revisions. I assessed his mental capacity myself. In addition, we obtained a written statement from his doctor confirming his full cognitive competence. I would strongly advise against contesting the will, Mrs. Harrison. Doing so would be both expensive and time-consuming, and, frankly, not likely to succeed. Elizabeth's eyes darted wildly around the room, desperate for someone to validate her disbelief, her rage. When her gaze landed on me, it turned venomous. The sheer hatred radiating from her eyes made me instinctively flinch. You, she spat, you did this. You turned Noah against me. I couldn't speak. The truth of everything I was hearing left me too stunned to even form words. All I could think was, Noah had protected me. Had he sensed what Elizabeth was planning long before she acted? Mr. Bradley cleared his throat. There's more, he said, addressing Elizabeth. Noah left behind a sealed letter to be opened in the event you contested any part of his will. He held up a white envelope, pristine and ominous, in his hands. Would you like me to read it now, or would you prefer I continue with the remaining provisions first? Elizabeth slowly lowered herself back into her chair, her face a twisted mask of fury and disbelief. Her jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. Continue, she hissed, barely restraining herself. Mr. Bradley nodded once. The family business, Harrison Design Group, is also placed in trust. 75% of its ownership will transfer to Ethan and Lily to be managed by a board of trustees until they reach the age of 25. The remaining 25% will be distributed to the company's current employees through a profit-sharing plan that Noah established just last month. Elizabeth's hands trembled visibly now. And what exactly, she demanded, her voice cracking, am I supposed to live on? Mr. Bradley adjusted his glasses, unflustered. In addition to your portion of the retirement funds, Noah arranged for a monthly allowance of $3,000 to be paid to you. This will continue for 5 years, or until you remarry, whichever comes first. Remarry? Elizabeth let out a bitter, hollow laugh. My husband just died. Yes, Mr. Bradley replied, his tone flat but his eyes knowing, which is precisely why I found Noah's explicit mention of remarriage interesting. The days that followed the reading of the will felt like living in the eye of a storm. Elizabeth moved through the house like a tempest barely held in check. Doors slammed with little warning. The air was thick with unspoken rage. She only spoke to me when absolutely necessary, and when she did, her words oozed venom. This isn't over, she said the first night, cornering me in the kitchen. Her eyes were wild. Noah was manipulated. He wasn't thinking clearly. I met her gaze, calm but unwavering. Noah was protecting his family, his children, his mother. He did what he felt was right. She let out a harsh laugh. Family? You really think this is about family? This is about money, Olga. My money, the life I built with Noah, something you're trying to steal from me. I never asked Noah to change his will, I said softly. I didn't even know about it until yesterday. Liar, she hissed. She stepped forward, finger jabbing inches from my face. You played the helpless old lady act. You made him feel sorry for you. You guilted him into it, but I won't let you get away with this. I'm going to contest every word of that will. And she did. 3 days later, I was served legal papers. Elizabeth had hired Winston Green, a top-tier attorney infamous for his ruthless tactics in divorce and probate law. The lawsuit claimed Noah had been under undue influence and lacked testamentary capacity when he made the changes to his will. In tears, I called Janet Peterson, my oldest friend and a retired judge. Janet, I whispered, voice cracking. I can't afford attorneys. Everything I had went into those houses. Don't worry, Janet replied, her tone as steady as always. I know exactly who you need. That's how I met Marion Chen, a fierce, brilliant elder law attorney who reviewed my case and agreed to represent me at a significantly reduced fee, payable only after the case concluded. This, Marion said during our first meeting, eyes sharp and voice firm, is elder abuse, financial exploitation. Noah saw what was happening and took action to protect you. Now it's our job to make sure his wishes are honored. Elizabeth's opening move was to try to evict me from the house, even while the case was pending. Marion countered immediately, securing a temporary order blocking the eviction. Elizabeth's next tactic was crueler. She tried to cut me off from my grandchildren. They need stability right now, she told their teachers and the neighbors, her voice full of false concern. Olga's mental health is deteriorating. She's making wild claims, turning the kids against me. The doctors think it's elder paranoia. Of course, I hadn't seen any doctors. No one had evaluated me. But the rumors spread quickly. Soon Ethan and Lily came home from school with worried faces and uncertain voices. "Grandma, are you sick?" Lily asked one afternoon, her little brows scrunched together with worry. "Mom said you might have to go to a special hospital." My heart ached. "No, sweetheart," I told her gently, brushing her hair back. "I'm not sick at all." "Then why is Mom saying those things?" Ethan asked sharply. At 13, he was old enough to sense when something didn't add up. His tone was skeptical, protective. I chose my words carefully. "Your mom and we don't agree on some things now that your dad is gone. But both of us love you very much." Just then Elizabeth walked in, her gaze instantly narrowing at the sight of me with the children. "Kids," she snapped, "go do your homework." I stood, my legs trembling beneath me, though I forced my posture straight, willing every ounce of strength into my aching joints. The room was quiet except for the soft creak of my shoes against the polished courtroom floor. All eyes followed me as I made my way to the witness stand, but I kept mine forward, focused, determined. I would not allow Elizabeth or her smug attorney to see any hint of fear. As I was sworn in, my hands barely stopped shaking. The clerk asked if I would tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I nodded and responded, "I do," though my voice was quieter than I'd intended. Still it held. Marion approached slowly, giving me space to settle before she began. "Mrs. Harrison," she said gently, "can you tell the court what you discovered the evening of June 8th at your late son's home?" I took a breath, a long one, the kind you take before diving deep, knowing the waters might pull you under. "That evening, Elizabeth had gone out," I began, my voice steadier now. "She claimed it was a business dinner, but I suspected otherwise. Earlier that day, I had found her in Noah's home office, going through his things. She claimed she had the right, that it was still her house, but it was clear to me she was searching for something specific." I paused, the memory flashing vividly before my eyes. The look of startled anger on her face, the way she had slammed the drawer shut when I caught her. "So, when she left that night, I went into the office myself," I continued. "I didn't know what I was looking for, but something in me, something that felt like Noah, was guiding me. I searched through the bottom drawer. Taped beneath some old tax documents, I found an envelope with my name on it. A murmur passed through the courtroom, soft but undeniable. I gripped the edge of the witness stand. "It was sealed," I said. "Inside was a USB drive and a handwritten letter from my son. He said if I was reading it, things had gone as he feared, that Elizabeth had shown her true self. He had been collecting evidence for over a year, financial records, emails, recordings of conversations. He said he wanted to protect me and the children, and that he had run out of time because of the cancer." I faltered. My voice cracked on that word. I saw Ethan in the back row bow his head. My heart ached, but I had to keep going. I owed it to Noah. I took the drive to my laptop. What I found, it was shocking. Elizabeth had been transferring money, small amounts at first, then larger ones, from their joint accounts to an account under her name alone. There were emails between her and her lover, Ryan Kendall. They'd been having an affair for 2 years. They spoke about life after Noah, about what they'd do once he was out of the picture. Gasps rippled through the small courtroom. Elizabeth stared straight ahead, her face pale, lips pinched, hands clenched in her lap. "But the most painful," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, were the recordings. In one, I heard her voice clear as day, discussing plans to put me in a nursing home against my will and sell everything the family had built. She said, once the old bat is locked away and Noah's gone, we'll sell everything and move to Arizona like we planned. No one will question it. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I could feel the weight of every pair of eyes in the room. Marian nodded, her voice low but firm. Mrs. Harrison, was this evidence turned over to your legal counsel? Yes, I said immediately. I called Marian the very next morning. I knew it changed everything. Thank you, Marian said gently. No further questions. Winston Green rose from his seat with the calculated elegance of a man used to turning things in his favor. Mrs. Harrison, geez, he began, voice calm, smooth, almost oily. You claim your son recorded these conversations in his home without informing his wife. Do you consider that an invasion of her privacy? I looked at him, steady now. I consider it protection. He was trying to protect his children and me, and he did it within his legal rights. And you just happened to find this envelope after Elizabeth went out for the evening? I didn't just happen to find it, I said, my tone sharper now. I was looking because I knew something wasn't right, and my son left it where he knew only I would find it. He tried another angle. How do we know this letter was written by your son and not fabricated? I stared at him with disbelief. Because I know my son's handwriting. I know his voice. And because I am not the one on tape conspiring to commit elder abuse and financial fraud. Judge Collins raised a hand. Mr. Green, unless you have evidence to dispute the origin of the materials, I suggest you move on. Winston clenched his jaw but stepped back. No further questions. I stepped down slowly, my body aching, but my heart a little lighter. I had done what I needed to do. Ethan gave me a small nod from the back. I saw the glint of tears in his eyes, but he held them back, like the strong, kind-hearted boy Noah had raised. And Elizabeth? She no longer looked composed. The navy dress she wore now seemed to swallow her, no longer the uniform of a grieving widow, but the mask of a woman unraveling, one lie at a time. I walked steadily to the witness stand, nerves coiled tightly beneath my calm exterior. After I was sworn in, Marian led me through a series of gentle, precise questions. She asked about my relationship with Noah, about the financial arrangements we made after my husband passed, and about my current life in the home I had shared with my family for decades. I answered as clearly as I could, my voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through me. I kept thinking of Noah, how hard he had worked to protect me, and how I couldn't let that be in vain. Then Winston Green stood to cross-examine. His smile was polite, but there was no warmth in it as he walked toward me. Mrs. Harrison, he began smoothly, isn't it true that you were financially dependent on your son? Yes, I replied without hesitation. There was no shame in the truth. After my husband died, I sold our home and gave the proceeds to Noah and Elizabeth. He raised an eyebrow. And now that he's gone, you're set to gain control of a significant portion of his assets. Assets that would have gone to his wife otherwise. Convenient, wouldn't you say? Objection, Marian said firmly. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Collins said, giving Green a pointed look. Mr. Green, please limit yourself to actual questions, not innuendo. Green switched tactics without missing a beat. Mrs. Harrison, have you ever been diagnosed with dementia? Any memory loss or cognitive decline? No, I said sharply, looking him dead in the eye. Yet you claim you didn't know about your son's changes to his will until after his death. Isn't it possible you're simply misremembering? That perhaps during his illness he did tell you and you've forgotten? I met his gaze, unflinching. My memory is clear, Mr. Green. Noah told me he had made arrangements, but he didn't go into specifics. He said he didn't want me to worry, especially not about this kind of confrontation. His strategy became more obvious with every question. He wanted to portray me as a confused, frail old woman who had manipulated her dying son. But I didn't waver. I stayed calm. I spoke only the truth, plainly and clearly. Once I stepped down from the stand, Marian called her next witness, a surprise. Ryan Kendall. Gasps filled the room as a tall, sandy-haired man in his mid-30s entered. His eyes flicked around the courtroom but carefully avoided Elizabeth. He was sworn in quickly. Mr. Kendall, Marion said evenly, please describe your relationship with Elizabeth Harrison. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We've been involved for about 2 years. Involved how exactly? Romantically, intimately. He swallowed hard before continuing. We met at a real estate conference. She told me her marriage was basically over, that she was just staying until what, Mr. Kendall? Until her husband died, he said quietly. She told me it was only a matter of time, and then we could be together openly. Across the courtroom, Elizabeth's expression twisted with rage. You traitor, she spat, loud enough for everyone to hear. Judge Collins struck her gavel sharply. Mrs. Harrison, control yourself or I will have you removed from this courtroom. Unfazed, Marion continued. She had Ryan confirm that there were emails, voice recordings, even plans to move to Arizona after Noah's death. He spoke about Elizabeth's intentions, what she had planned regarding me, the children, and the family business. By the time Green got up to cross-examine, it was already too late. The damage was done. Ryan's testimony had lined up perfectly with everything Noah had saved on that USB drive. From my seat near the back, I could see Ethan's face. He sat still, pale and stricken, eyes wide and shimmering with unshed tears. My heart cracked for him. No child should have to learn this kind of truth about their mother. But he needed to know. As the hearing drew to a close, Judge Collins announced that she would review all the evidence privately and issue a ruling the following week. But the way she looked at Elizabeth as we wrapped up, firm, unwavering, it told me everything. Noah had done it. Even from the grave, he had protected us. 2 years have passed since that day. 2 years of healing, of rediscovering what it means to feel safe, to feel whole. The ache of losing Noah hasn't disappeared, but the edges of that pain have dulled. I've learned to live around it. I've even made room for joy again. Judge Collins ruled decisively in our favor. She dismissed Elizabeth's petition to contest the will and upheld all of Noah's final arrangements. Elizabeth was furious. She threatened more legal action, stormed out of the courtroom in a flurry of accusations. But even her attorney knew it was hopeless. The evidence was too strong. The truth was undeniable. In the end, she had to accept the judgment. She took the 20% share of Noah's retirement fund, about $175,000, and moved to Phoenix with Ryan. Last I heard, they had already split up. Some relationships can't survive without secrets and scandal. Elizabeth surprised everyone when she relinquished custody of the children without much resistance. But not me. I'd seen how detached she'd been with them. Always polished, always posing, more concerned with appearances than their emotional needs. When Ethan said he wanted to live with me, she barely raised an eyebrow. Lily was torn for a while, but in the end, she chose her brother. She couldn't bring herself to trust the mother she once thought she knew. The first few months were the hardest. The kids were mourning not just Noah, but the version of their mother that had never really existed. They had questions I couldn't always answer, hurts I couldn't always fix. We went to family therapy together, learning how to talk about things we had buried, learning how to trust again. One evening as we sat on the porch swing, Noah's favorite place, Ethan turned to me. Why didn't Dad tell us about Mom? I took a breath. I think he wanted to protect you, I said gently. He tried to talk to her, to make things right, but then he got sick. And after that, all he could think about was making sure you two would be okay. He saved us, Ethan said quietly. He saved you too, Grandma. Tears rose in my eyes. Yes, I whispered. He did. Now it's just the 3 of us living in the family home. I sleep in the master bedroom, something Elizabeth fought bitterly to keep, even though Noah had clearly stated in his will that it would be mine. I've redecorated it to feel like home, not a showroom. Gone are the expensive, impersonal furnishings Elizabeth had insisted on. In their place are soft fabrics, warm tones, and personal touches that reflect who I am. The Harrison Design Group is thriving under the leadership team Noah put in place. They keep me involved, value my thoughts, and keep Ethan and Lily updated, preparing them for the legacy they'll inherit one day. In these past 2 years, I've learned more about architecture and interior design than I ever thought possible. Lily, now 12, shows a real gift. She sketches constantly, rooms, buildings, whole neighborhoods. Dad would have loved this one, she often says, showing me her latest design. And he would have. I see him in her creativity, in the spark of vision in her eyes. I see him in Ethan too, now 16, tall and serious, already talking about college, about business and architecture, about eventually taking over the company. Noah is gone, but he's not lost. He lives on in them, in me, in the way we carry him forward every day, with strength, with purpose, with love. He told me not long ago that he wanted to make his dad proud. I looked him in the eyes and said, "You already do. You've always made him proud." We use the cabin in Tahoe all the time now. Holidays, long summer breaks, whenever we can steal a few quiet days together. It's not just a house anymore. It's become a place where old traditions breathe alongside the new ones we've made. Last Christmas, we invited Janet and her family to join us. The rooms were filled with warmth and laughter, a kind of laughter that comes from healing. It echoed through the cabin like music. Noah would have loved it, every second. Elizabeth still calls on birthdays and holidays. Her voice, forced and overly cheerful, stretches awkwardly across the line. The kids answer out of politeness. The conversations are short, stilted, and by the time they hang up, they seem more relieved than hurt. She's never made an effort to come visit, not once, even though the law would allow her to. But no one complains. If anything, her absence brings a quiet peace. As for me, widowhood, unexpected and unchosen, brought with it a strange kind of freedom. The grief is still there, folded neatly into the corners of my life, but it no longer suffocates. I joined a book club. I started painting again. Watercolors, soft and gentle. And recently I've been seeing a man named Frank. He's a widower too. We met at the community garden, two people quietly rebuilding from loss. It's nothing serious, not yet, but he makes me laugh. He sits across from me during coffee and sees me, not as a mother in mourning or a grandmother clinging to the past, but as a woman. It's nice to be seen again. Sometimes I wish Noah could see what we've become, how we've held each other up, how we've risen through the grief and built something whole again. But then I wonder, maybe he already knew. Maybe he foresaw all this, that the steps he took, the careful way he planned, weren't just about financial safety. They were about giving us a real shot at joy again. A family made not out of duty, but out of choice, out of love. When I'm alone, I still talk to him. I tell him about the kids, their milestones, their missteps, their victories. I tell him how the business is steady, how the days are softer now. I tell him how safe he made this life for us. And every night I touch the photo I keep by my bed, the one of him smiling, that easy smile. "You'd be proud," I whisper. "You did good, son. You really did." Yesterday marked another year without him. We went to the cemetery together, the three of us, and brought fresh flowers bright against the gray. We stood around his grave and took turns sharing memories, some that made us laugh, others that tightened our throats. On the walk back to the car, Ethan wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "You know what I think Dad would have loved most?" he said. "That we're happy again, that we kept going." Lily nodded, her voice calm but certain, and that Elizabeth got what she deserved. I looked at them, my grandchildren, and felt something settle inside me. These two had lived through storms most children never should. Yet somehow, they'd remained soft-hearted and strong. "I think you're both right," I said. That night, as I curled into bed, I thought back to Noah's funeral. I'd been so afraid then, afraid I'd end up cast aside, forgotten in some lonely nursing home, just an old woman waiting out her days. But life had gone another way. I found myself surrounded by warmth, laughter, and love. A family not just intact, but thriving. A home that truly belonged to me. Everywhere I look, there are traces of my son's love, quiet, enduring acts of care. And I remembered what Elizabeth once said, thinking no one important was around to hear her. Now finally, I'll get rid of that old shrew. The cruelty of her words had cut deep at the time. But life has a way of answering cruelty with quiet justice. In the end, she was the one who had to leave. It was Noah's last promise kept, his final act of protection. As I drifted into sleep, a smile tugged at my lips. They say the best revenge is living well. If that's true, then this gentle, peaceful life I've built in the ashes, is the sweetest triumph of all.